A steel tower, half swallowed by Antarctic ice, was still running machinery inside it, 80 years after every person who built it had vanished. Nobody knew it was there. Nobody was looking for it. And deep within its frozen walls, behind a sealed blast door, something was broadcasting, not once, not occasionally, continuously. Every hour of every day for 8 decades. A signal had been pushing out into the empty. Antarctic silence. 2. Geologists were about to become the first living souls to hear what it contained. Don't look away. What they found inside will stay with you. John Henson had spent 11 seasons on the ice. By October of that year, Antarctica was as familiar to him as pavement, featureless, brutal, and honest in the way only truly indifferent places can be. His assignment was routine. He and his colleague Chris Reynolds were mapping subsurface rock formations southeast of the Ellsworth Mountains, dragging ground-penetrating radar across miles of white nothing, logging data that would die quietly in a university database. Chris was younger, only 2 seasons in, but sharp. An electrical engineering background before he switched to geology, he could read radar outputs the way other people read faces instantly, intuitively. On the 6th day, the radar made a sound Chris had never heard. The return signature was enormous. Too large, too uniform, too angular, too be rock. It sat 12 meters below the surface and stretched across a footprint the size of a building. Chris ran the scan twice more. Same result. Man-made. Definitively, they radioed base camp. The response was confused. No records of any installation in that sector. No research stations, no supply caches, nothing. The coordinator told them to flag the coordinates and move on, John agreed. Chris couldn't stop staring at the data. They returned 2 days later with better equipment. Approaching on foot, Chris spotted it first, a dark shape barely visible against the white. Roughly 300 meters from the radar's strongest ping, a steel lattice tower, 4 meters of it exposed above the ice. The rest was buried. Wind had scoured one side clean, revealing riveted metal plates and a faded emblem neither of them recognized. John photographed it and sent the image to Cambridge via satellite phone. The response came back in. Under an hour, the emblem belonged to a British nautical beacon station, part of a navigation network built in the late 1940s. Most had been decommissioned and demolished. This one had simply been lost, buried by snowfall, erased from operational records during a filing transfer in 1971, gone from every map, every database. Every memory Cambridge told them to document the exterior and leave. Then Chris pressed his ear against the steel plating. He pulled back with an expression. He didn't say anything. He just pointed. John leaned in. Through the metal, faint, rhythmic, unmistakable. A deep mechanical pulse. Steady as a heartbeat. Something inside was still moving. It took a day and a half to clear the entrance. The blast doors were sealed by decades of compressed snow turned to solid ice. A thermal lance kit arrived by Skidoo from base camp, along with a safety officer named Priya Larry, who ran atmospheric sensors before allowing any cutting. No toxic gases. No oxygen depletion. Whatever was inside, the structure had held. 3 hours of cutting. Then the blast door groaned open. Stale air poured out, cold, metallic, carrying the smell of machine oil and old iron, the smell of something preserved rather than abandoned. John clicked on his headlamp and stepped inside. The mess hall came first. Small, built for 8 or 10. Tin plates on the table, woolen coats hanging frozen stiff from wall hooks. In the corner, a chess set mid-game, pieces undisturbed. Whoever had been playing never finished. The bunk room next. 6 beds, neatly made. Personal items on the shelves above each one. Reading glasses. A Bible with a cracked cover. A photograph of a woman and 2 children, edges curled with age. The thumping was louder now, resonating up through the floor plates. They followed it deeper, past a supply room, a medical bay with glass bottles still lined up in a cabinet. past frozen pressure gauges, whose needles hadn't moved in decades. At the end of the corridor, a door unlike the others, heavier, reinforced, wheel-style handle, and stenciled across its face. In lettering, John didn't immediately recognize Cyrillic. Russian. This was supposed to be a British station. Nothing in the Cambridge records mentioned Soviet involvement. John gripped the wheel and pulled. The mechanism ground, resisted, then turned with a screech. That echoed the full length of the corridor. The door swung. Inward, the thumping hit them like a physical force. The room was alive. Alive. In a way nothing abandoned for 80 years had any right to be. Banks of steel consoles lined every wall, covered in dials and switches and meters. Indicator lights glowed amber and red behind dusty glass. Vacuum tubes, the size of bottles, hummed with faint orange warmth. At the center of it all, a radio transmitter console, enormous, fully powered. Electric current buzzing through exposed wiring. The air was warm. Priya pushed past them, radiation detector already running. It spiked, not dangerous, but enough. She traced the source to a sealed steel cylinder bolted to the floor behind the main console. Warm to the touch. Humming steadily, the markings matched Soviet military designation codes from the early Cold War. It was a nuclear battery. A radioisotope thermoelectric generator, the kind theorized in Soviet weapons research during the late 1940s but never confirmed to have been successfully built. Classified prototypes that were supposed to have remained on paper. This one had been built, installed, and left running. For 80 years. It had silently powered the entire communications room without interruption, without maintenance. Without a single human hand touching it. The thumping was coming from a mechanical wire recorder beside the transmitter. An early audio system using thin steel wires spooled between two reels. It had jammed at some point. Its mechanism stuck in a loop, rewinding and replaying the same segment endlessly. That relentless clunking was what had pulled them through the station. Chris found the output speaker. He adjusted the volume dial. The room filled with a sound. None of them would ever forget. A man's voice. Faint, distorted by decades of wire degradation, but unmistakably, devastatingly human. He was speaking rapidly, switching between Russian and broken English. The words were fractured by time, but the meaning was completely clear. He was giving coordinates, describing failing equipment, dwindling supplies. He was begging, pleading for any aircraft in range to respond, for anyone at all to hear him. The message ran for 90 seconds. Then the wire snapped back to the beginning, and the same voice started again. Same words. Same coordinates. Same desperate plea. Cycling on loop for longer than any person in that room had been alive. A dead man calling out into the Antarctic silence. Waiting for a rescue that never came and never would. Priya was the one who finally turned the volume. Down, the three of them stood in the humming. Warmth of that impossible. Ruman didn't speak for a very long time. Investigation that followed was multinational. British and Russian authorities reviewed declassified cold war records and confirmed what the Cyrillic lettering had suggested. A small Soviet signals team had been covertly embedded at the station during a brief secret period of Cold War cooperation in the early 1950s, when political relations collapsed. The British officially decommissioned the station. The Soviet personnel were supposed to be extracted separately. Records showed a retrieval. Mission had been scheduled. There was no confirmation it ever launched. The crew had been left behind. Cut off. No way to reach the outside world except a transmitter powered by an experimental generator that wasn't supposed to exist. Broadcasting a distress call into a frequency no one was monitoring. In a location erased from every map, they recorded their message, set it to loop, and waited. Personal effects in the bunk room were matched to 4 Soviet engineers and 2 radio operators. Their remains were not found inside the station. A search of the surrounding ice shelf recovered nothing. Where they went after recording that message, how long they survived. What they did in those final days remains unknown. The wire recorder was transported to a preservation facility in London. The nuclear battery was extracted by a hazmat team and transferred to a secure site. The station was sealed and marked for future archaeological work. John filed his report and returned to his regular survey duties the following season. He never asked for a transfer away from Antarctic fieldwork, but colleagues noticed he stopped wearing headphones while working on the ice. He preferred to keep his ears open, just in case something out there was still trying to be heard. Asterisk. Would you have entered that station or walked away?